Have you ever looked at an old black and white photo? I just wondered, what did it really look like? Not in those faded shades of gray, but in full, living color. Well, modern AI is doing just that. It's like a digital time machine, turning these dusty, forgotten moments into something vivid and real. But, and this is the interesting part, this incredible new technology is also kicking up some huge billion-dollar questions about who gets to own the past once we've brought it back to life.
I mean, just look at this. This single image really shows you the kind of power we're talking about. On the left, you've got this distant, grainy memory, right? But on the right, wow, that same moment feels immediate. It feels like you could just step right into the frame. This isn't just a simple filter. It's a total game changer in how we connect with history.
So how does this magic trick actually work? Well, it's a whole lot more sophisticated than just slapping on a coat of digital paint. To get these really stunning, authentic results, creators are using a multi-step process that actually cleans, sharpens, and then colorizes old footage. It's about turning artifacts into art.
Okay, so one of the coolest parts of this is something called upscaling. Now think about it. Normally when you try to make an old photo bigger, it just gets blurry, right? That's because you're just stretching out these same old pixels. But AI is way smarter. It's been trained on millions of images, so it doesn't just stretch, it intelligently generates new, realistic pixels to fill in the gaps. It's adding real detail that was lost to time. It's a whole workflow. First, the AI does a cleanup job, getting rid of all that physical damage. You know, the scratches, the dust, the grain. Then it does that upscaling we just talked about, maybe bumping the footage up to a modern resolution like 4K. It's only after all that prep work that the colorization really begins, using tools like Unifab or CapCut, where the AI makes its best guess on the colors. But here's the crucial final step, human refinement. This is where an artist steps in, maybe using Photoshop's neural filters to manually tweak things like skin tones and textures to make them look truly alive, not just painted on.
And, this is not a perfect one-click process. AI can definitely get things wrong. Colors might flicker from one frame to the next, or they might just look, well, off. To fix that flickering, for example, creators use something called temporal processing, which basically helps the AI remember that, hey, that coat should stay the same shade of brown in every frame. And to avoid those really garish, unrealistic colors like a hot pink car in the 1920s, they actually have to do historical research to ground the AI's choices in reality.
All right, so you've done all this incredible work. You've cleaned, upscaled, and colorized a piece of public domain history. You've brought it back to life. But now we get to the really tricky part. A fascinating, complex question comes up. Do you now own it?
And this is the pivot. You'd think that all your creative energy, all that technical skill, would mean the final work is yours, right? Well, the law, especially here in the United States, has a very specific and, frankly, very important point of view on that.
So it all comes down to this one fundamental principle. For something to get a copyright, it has to have a human author. The U.S. Copyright Office has been super clear about this. A machine, an algorithm, an AI, none of those can be an author in the eyes of the law. So if a work is created entirely by an AI, it's not protected. It just falls right back into the public domain.
Now, this isn't just some abstract legal theory. Let's dig into a real-world case that put this exact principle to the test and ended up setting a huge precedent for basically every creator using AI today.
Okay, so this graphic novel, Zarya of the Dawn, became ground zero for the copyright battle in the age of generative AI. The author, Kristina Kashtanova, she wrote the story, but she used the AI tool Midjourney to generate all of the artwork. Then, she went and applied for a copyright for the entire book.
And at first, believe it or not, the Copyright Office granted it to her. But then, just a few months later, they hit the brakes. They took a second look and decided to partially cancel the registration. This whole thing happened so fast that it actually forced the Copyright Office to release formal guidance for all creators on exactly how to handle AI-generated content.
And here's the key takeaway, the final verdict. The Copyright Office ruled that Kastanova's human contributions, those were protected. So that means the text she wrote and the creative ways she selected and arranged all the images to tell her story, that was all hers. But the individual images created by Midjourney? Nope, they were not protected because they were deemed not the product of human authorship.
Okay, so this brings us to the really practical stuff. For anyone out there using these incredible tools today, what can you actually protect? What can you claim as your own?
It all boils down to what the Copyright Office is calling the creative control test.
Basically, what matters is how much of the final creative result came directly from a human. Just typing in a text prompt and getting an image back, that's probably not enough creative control over how that final image actually looks.
So let's break it down. You can copyright your human contributions, the text you write, the way you arrange the AI elements. You might even be able to copyright big creative changes you make to the AI's output. But, and this is the really important part, when you go to register your work, you have to tell them which parts were made by AI and basically disclaim ownership of them.
It's also really important to remember that this whole thing is still evolving, and the US approach isn't the only one out there. If you look at the United Kingdom, for example, they have a totally different take. Their law actually recognizes computer-generated works and gives them copyright protection, although for a shorter period of time. It just goes to show you how differently countries are trying to figure this whole new world out.
So what does all of this mean for the future, for creativity, for history, heck, even for our own family photo albums? We're standing at this new frontier, right where these powerful AI tools meet century-old copyright law.
I mean, the potential here is massive. We can restore our own family photos and make them feel brand new again. Historians can make their archives way more engaging for a new generation of students. And creators can build entirely new businesses from public domain material. But to do any of that, you have to understand these new rules of ownership. And that's really the final question we want to leave you with. Right now, the law basically sees AI as a tool, like a fancy camera. But what happens when that tool starts to feel less like a tool and more like a creative collaborator? That line is blurring more and more every single day. And how we decide to redefine authorship is going to shape the future of art, law, and history itself.